Welcome to Spirit School. I'm your mentor, Danielle Sarank, also known as the Squamish Medium. In this podcast, I share honestly all I have learned about the mediumship and spiritual development journey. My intention is to normalize these conversations, to make way for a more confident, clear, and connected wave of lightworkers, serving the world of spirit with an open and joyful soul. Welcome again to Spirit School. Happy National Indigenous Peoples Day. Happy summer solstice, Spirit School listeners. A very special episode for you here today. Somebody who I have looked up to and admired for some time in their reclamation work of their Indigenous heritage, their teachings, their generosity in sharing their medicine with the world. On National Indigenous Peoples Day, I wanted to bring you a special episode with Asha Frost. So I hope you enjoy this interview, and I hope you enjoy a summer season ahead, friends. Blessings to you all. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Spirit School. I have a very special guest here today that I'm very excited to interview and share with you all. She may need little to no introduction to you all. I'm sure you're all aware of her books and her decks, but I am inviting in Asha Frost today. How are you doing, Asha?
I'm great. It's such a gift to be here. Thank you.
No worries. Asha is a traditional healer, a medicine woman. She's also a best-selling author of the book, You Are the Medicine. She is the creator of one of my favorite decks I have over here, the Sacred Medicine Oracle deck, with her new deck coming out later this year, the Elders Oracle deck, which is centered around animal teachings, which I am very excited about. Asha hails from the Crane clan and resides on her traditional Anishinaabe territories. I want to thank you for coming to the Spirit School podcast. I admire so much of your work over these past few years. Am I missing anything part of that intro other than being a fantastic mother of two, which I'm dying to dive into? How do you introduce yourself to the world, Asha?
Yeah, well, usually a little bit traditionally sometimes. So now Dainagwe Kwe Dishnakas, Nijing Agaming and Dunjaba, Ajijak Dodam. So my spirit name is Healing Rainbow Woman. And as you said, I'm from the Crane clan and from Cape Croker First Nation. On my mother's side and my father's side is from Serpent River, all in so-called Ontario. So I like to do that to just invite those ancestor spirits in.
I really appreciate that. My lineage hails from York Factory, Manitoba, York Landing, Manitoba, which we call Muskego territory now and part of our language reclamation. So just calling in that lineage as well. Thank you for being here. There's so much I want to talk to you about today, but I want to start a little bit on your journey to becoming a traditional healer and a medicine woman. And I know that when we talk to people who are called to maybe shamanic paths or paths of medicine, there's usually an initiation that takes place that can be quite earth-shattering. And I know that you had a diagnosis quite early that led you to some holistic healing and a reconnection to your culture. And so I'm curious a little bit about, the path, that initiation process and that reconnection journey for yourself, if you were able to connect in with your local community, if this was something that was done through, the ancestors and channeling, and just anything you want to share about that reconnection journey.
Yeah. So when I was diagnosed with lupus, it was like an earth-shattering moment. And I thought, how am I going to come back and return to wellness? And so I went on a search for that. And in my search, everything started to open up. And all my life, I had been experiencing spirit coming to me at night. I've experiencing, things coming through my channeled awareness, but not really knowing what that was. But when I got really sick, that they really amped up. So my ancestors would come at night and in kind of dark figure ways that would freak me out. And I would search out these healers who said, your ancestors have been talking to you. They've been wanting you to communicate with them for your whole lifetime. They're waking you up to this. And it felt so true to me. And it was in that moment that I thought, oh my goodness, I have all of this blood and bone memory, and these teachings exist within me, and they've been fractured or broken or taken away So I just went on this, it felt like an adventure. How am I going to reclaim this knowing? How am I going to call this wisdom back? It was a slow reclamation. I wish I could say it happened overnight. It's still happening. That was 20, goodness, 5 years ago. And it's still happening to this day where I feel like I'm uncovering little bits and pieces of what has been fractured in my lineage. So, no, I grew up in Newmarket, Ontario, which is close to Toronto, north of Toronto. And I wasn't connected to any community here. There
Yeah.
were no Indigenous people in my school except for a couple of second cousins. And it was really hard to find that connection. And what was the hardest part was feeling worthy of it, feeling worthy of, am I enough to go and reach out to that elder? Are they going to think that I'm a fraud? Are they going to think that I'm, not like I didn't grow up on the reserve? All of these things came up in my awareness, and it kept me a little bit distant from doing that because I felt shame around
Yeah.
that. And I hear the beautiful thing about that is after my book came out, I hear so many similar stories from younger Indigenous folks. And that's what they say to me. Like, I felt so much shame and block into trying to reclaim my teachings because I don't know where to go. I don't have any, it's not accessible to me.
Yeah.
So that really speaks to me. It makes me a bit emotional because I know that that was something I struggled with for 20 years, at least about 15 to 20 years. I really struggled with feeling worthy of reclamation and then sharing.
Yeah, you're gonna make me emotional because like I could pretty much say the same thing. Our community was closed down in 1958 by the government, and everyone is asked to go find new lands. And so we actually don't even have a territory to return to. And so, my grandmother passed away in 1992, which was my connection. And we didn't even know what community she was from until we found letters after she passed away. And so a lot of it's been a rediscovering. And, my brother recovered from a really 20-year long heroin addiction through reconnecting to culture and getting placed into a men's healing house and living a traditional lifestyle, and through no other like Western medicine had a 2-year sobriety stint just from reconnecting to the culture. And so I know how much reconnection can heal. And I know that that was a really big impetus for me and my family to really start our reconnection journey as well. And I started working with the First Nations Health Authority. And I just want to say all those emotions around shame, because as you're like stepping into the culture, like you can misstep and you get called in every once in a while. And it could be a humbling experience. And with the assimilation of the residential school, so many of us are on reconnecting journeys. So I just want to say thank you for starting with that and sharing that. And I know, my dad's email address is one lost half breed because I know he's been feeling it his whole life as well. And you'd mentioned on a previous episode how it really is our generation. I believe you are also the second generation out of the schools doing that healing work. And so thank you for bringing that up and acknowledging that, because I know a lot of people feel very similarly, but you've done it so well and with such grace and just so much generosity in your sharing. So thank you for that.
Something else I want to speak about, because sometimes I hear this question or this statement from people about their shame and how it's shut them down completely and they haven't even tried. And I say that's what the colonizer wanted. That's what the colonizer wants. So we also have to know that that system of colonization is still at work to try to shut us down from reclamation. And if that shame wins and takes over, then we won't do it. So I have to remember that sometimes, like those voices that are so harsh and the ones that even live inside of us, we have to acknowledge it's not the truth of our ancestors and what they would want for us. I believe that.
Oh, absolutely. And I was looking at your Instagram earlier today and you said a quote. I said this last week when I was doing some Thunderbird. You come up, so many synchronicities come up because I used your Oracle card in my retreat last week when I was doing some Thunderbird teachings. And one of your traditional names is she who walks with Thunderbird, which I think is incredibly powerful. And what came through this meditation I was guiding people through was like, you are the prayer of your ancestors. Like you are the living prayer of your ancestors. And you had posted around your birthday something similar. So it seems like we're receiving similar messages in our generation, really helping to like lift the Indigenous spirit again and bring more centered awareness around it, which is beautiful. And on that kind of pendulum swing, we also get into some really deep conversations around appropriation, right? You really kind of came out in the world through your Dear White Woman letter in 2020, height of, Black Lives Matter. Of course, Black Lives Matter started in 2018, but at 2020, it was really kind of like that peak. And so, as part of this reconnection journey, healing the generations, healing the lines while being front and center as an advocate for an Indigenous voice, like, was that experience for you like extra healing? Did it bring up things that had to be healed? Have you seen a before and after when it comes to like the collective consciousness around this?
I love that you're asking me this question now because I wrote that letter in 2019. And at the time, that was before, and it was actually before the Black Lives Matter Black Square thing, right? So I had shared it and people were talking, and kind of the awareness of starting to grow, but then everything exploded open. And at that time, when I did share that letter and I shared that, it was very traumatizing because I did not have the capacity to receive what was coming back at me. I was not viral. I wasn't an influencer. I wasn't anything. I mean, I was a healer. I was doing my work in my little basement, in my safe cavern, right? And I was on a blog that I wrote on my website. I didn't think it was going to be shared far and wide.
Mm.
So even I had one last week, a DM of somebody who was furious at me. And I haven't had one of those in a while. And it still shook me because, when you go into your DMs, you're not really expecting to get something like that.
Yeah.
So I still think, and I share this because I find it hard still, as someone who has a public facing presence and somebody who's out there a lot, I still find it hard to navigate some of those energies of trying to constantly educate or explain myself or whatever those things are, and taking in other people's stories because people don't understand. I'm at my computer taking in sometimes hundreds and hundreds or thousands of words because people want to share their long story with me to try to tell me why, try to tell me, defend themselves and say why they're doing this and that, and they want my approval. Like, it's just a lot. It's a lot. So I think that it's been a huge journey since I shared that letter. And I think that things have changed. However, I think things have changed quite significantly because in 2019, everybody was like, what are you talking about? Cultural appropriation. Oh, yeah, I understand. I don't want to wear a headdress. Like, they got that part, but
Yeah.
they didn't really understand the complexity of the rest of it. And now I feel like people are doing the work. Like, I see in our communities, I'm talking about more new age spiritual communities.
Yeah.
Before, you'd see way more pictures of people doing smudging all over their ads or their pictures. I don't see that as much anymore. How about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I agree. It comes up in, I ask you this because, I talk to my students about it. And, even me not growing up in the culture, not being able to grow up in the culture because of Canada's assimilation process, we were really robbed of our traditional teachings. And a lot of my teachings that have come in have been through personal ritual, through personal experiences, like with tobacco, abusing colonized tobacco for 20 years. I now grow tobacco as my own medicine, but it didn't grow up in my grandmother's territories, and it doesn't grow naturally in many places in BC, right? But it's like a personal medicine for me. And can I call that indigenous teaching? Not necessarily, but it's my teaching. So I think I just direct people to their own personal experiences. And, we use Palo Santo, and that doesn't, hail from here either. And it's about like sourcing it ethically, letting people know where you source it, creating your own kind of ritual with it. But I agree, it can be quite, I think people are more conscious of it now. And
Mhm.
I think people are more driven to their own personal practices. And that's what I see with kind of like the downfall of even organized religion.
Yeah.
People are looking for a more intimate divine connection rather than mirroring what has been told how it's been done. So I've been seeing people lean more towards personal practices than the cultural appropriation in my experience.
Yeah. Yeah,
For
thank you for
sure.
sharing that. I think I love what you shared too about your own connection, like really developing that through spirit, through the channel, through connection, many of the ways that teachings have come in have been that way for me too. I've had different teachers, different elders, which have been very powerful too. But the most potent energy and teachings that I've received have been when I'm lying on a table sobbing and I'm doing a journey and an ancestor comes, or a part of my spirit is reclaimed, or I do a soul retrieval and there's an alignment, and then it's rooted from the depths of my being, and then it's there. And
Yeah.
that is the teaching, that's that lived embodied wisdom. That is my biggest teacher. That
Yeah.
has been my biggest teacher. So, and I think there's all different ways of gathering teachings and learning and wisdom. So I wish that we could all embrace that with each other too, and see that maybe you learned that way and you had the connection and the privilege of learning from elders and teachers. Amazing. Good for you. You go. And perhaps you've been disconnected and you learned through dream time and visioning and journeying and through chronic illness. You go. I want us to support each other. I'm here to uplift all of those ways because they're all valid.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And before I move on to a bit more of your healing and staying on the advocacy, because you kind of hinted to this as well, but something I've seen a lot in, Indigenous communities and Indigenous people is this like fatigue of correcting behavior, very basic, microaggressions, or, even online, blatant racism against Indigenous people is almost tolerated at levels that isn't so with any other culture. Even, locally, when you could post news articles, our local paper, it would just have like the most blatantly racist comments. And, my advocacy is I will always correct that behavior with my full name. And so when I ask people who are very conscious about, wanting to be an ally, I was like, even if you just didn't wait for Indigenous people to do the labor and like call out this behavior right away. Like that's a great way to like step into that allyship so that Indigenous people are not having to wear all that labor, right? Because have you felt that fatigue? I imagine you have over the years, because
Yeah.
that's where your career really kind of took off.
Yeah, many, many, many times. And I really think about the word microaggression because I realized in the last year how the microaggressions become macro in the body. Because I think I deal with this chronic illness energy, I realized that those microaggressions become so big, as big implants in the body somehow, or they become rooted in the body. So that's serious. That's harm, right? And it is speaking to those things. And I often take time, if there's like 5 microaggressions that have happened over a week, I take time to do my own healing around it. I try to evolve and alchemize that. And then there are always words on the other side, because for me, that embodied wisdom needs to come out so that that's part of reconciliation for me. Like, the harm happens, things happen, and I don't want to always be that one body transmuting that. It's sad sometimes for me. So I ask folks, can you take one little part of what we're carrying on our shoulders, one little part of what we're carrying in our hearts? If you can take that and transmute that and evolve that and speak to it, you are helping us. So I want more of that. I'm trying to ask for more of that. But that's why I speak up about those microaggressions, because I'm hoping that by my speaking, it starts to diffuse it in everyone's bodies. It starts to diffuse it and unwind and start the healing process for all of us. That's what I'm hoping. And
Yeah.
yeah.
I love that. And thank you for touching on that. And, I'm not going to ask so much labor out of you out of this interview, but I wanted to, it's such a big part of your work. And I appreciated even recently as we head into Indigenous Peoples Day tomorrow. Of course, now in Canada, as part of reconciliation, the government gave themselves a day off when I wish that they stayed in the workplaces and helped, Indigenous economy, Indigenomics, and like brought people in for some educating. But, that's besides the point. I'm not a politician over here. But one other thing that we share, Asha, that I love about your story, and people who've been listening to my podcast for a long time know, like, I had debilitating stage fright. I used to work at the First Nations Health Authority. I spent 10 years working for people in First Nations health governance and loved that work. I was very passionate about it. And because we had a stream of wellness called Respecting Tobacco, and I had successfully, alchemized, I guess, my relationship with the medicine. They would put me into rooms and speak about my journey, and I would completely black out, and I wouldn't remember who I was, what I was doing, and it would only happen every once in a while. And it was actually through podcasting behind the computer that I started to come into my voice a little bit.
Mm,
And when I was listening to a lot of your story over the years, I know that you came across a homeopathic medicine that healed the inner shy child.
mm,
And I know that that was something that really shifted and changed for you because you do have a softer demeanor. And I imagine having to heal the inner shy child, stepping in front in such a legacy building, high visibility way, that there would have been quite a healing journey to come into that. What was that like? What were those first speaking engagements like? And, you've been at it for 20 years. What we see today is somebody who's mastered this, but going back, what was that like for you?
Oh my goodness. I remember the first couple of healing circles. I started with healing circles and meditation classes, and I remember writing out every single word and practicing and feeling so nervous. I remember my butterflies that would be there. There was maybe like 8 people in that class, and they were all so loving and cozy and caring. It wasn't like I was on this huge stage, but I would feel that. And it really was building a bit of resilience and a bit of moving through those butterflies and having those butterflies transform and be offered to the world over and over again. That started to, it really was doing the thing,
Yeah.
right? That started to just help. And I say this to all the people I mentor. I'm like, we can dream, we can vision. I love the dreamers of the world. We need you. And we also need you to plant it down and spread your wings and take those leaps, because that is where the impact is made. And if I can do it as someone who was really like excruciatingly shy as a child, I know people can do that. And I believe we do need different types of leaders, different types of speakers. We tend to value or put on pedestals the ones that are the loudest and the most gregarious and the most extroverted. I love those speakers too. And I know the power of a softer presence. I know the potency. People say to me, you are gentle yet powerful. Sometimes I wonder how I hold both of that, but I do believe I do. And I see the shifts and the ripples and the presence and the impact that happens when I'm speaking to a crowd. But it's taken time. It's taken 20 years of me practicing, seeing, messing up, making mistakes, wondering how it was after. I still will do that. I still leave in my car thinking, I hope that was okay. Did I do okay? I think we just carry those things forever. I want to normalize those feelings because I think that all of us feel those things. Some of us just admit to it more than others. But it's been such a journey. So if you ever feel, oh, I'm too shy to do that, or my voice isn't loud enough, just know that your presence speaks louder than words. So if you can align with your authentic presence, that is going to glow up the entire world.
Yes, I love everything about that. And, I did some public speaking training. And one thing I learned through that was, the only way to build confidence is on the other side of doing the thing. Like there's no prep, there's no books, there's no studying you can do that can prepare you, like just repetition and just doing it. And so I really love that advice. And that's what Spirit School's been founded on, are these vulnerable
Mm.
conversations. So it's comforting. And I think it'll be comforting for the majority of the audience to know, like when you leave, you're like, could have said this, should have said this. Like that's just part of our human nature, I think, as especially when we're so passionate about the work and about our body of work. So I love that you bring that up. And I just want to bring in too that I remember my first home circles. I started teaching in 2016, 2017. I was so nervous. I would actually play my mentor's guided visualization. So I was like, okay, we're going to listen to my teacher now. Like I was way too nervous to even do things like that. And then now I can like plan a class in 3 minutes and
Of
like just completely
course.
rock it. Right.
I
So
know. Oh, that's such a beautiful, it's so beautiful though, right? Because it just shows those really baby steps that we take. And we do need those moments to build those confident, I don't know, movements forward. So I love that. That's a beautiful story.
yeah, I'm glad. And I'm glad that you found your voice. And, you do mention, that you've just always felt the strong pull towards a legacy. Like, I know I'm here to say something. So I find it interesting that the people who end up like having the voice start off really shy and have to move through that and work through that. You know what I mean? I see a lot of commonality between people who have like high visibility now. A lot of people did have to work through a lot of those throat chakra, heart chakra kind of like wounds, right?
Mm.
So on the other side of that, you don't use the same language as me because I'm more traditionally trained as a medium. Like I would say definitely spiritualist influenced, but I'm not a spiritualist myself. And like you're clearly a medium.
Mm.
And you're clearly like a medium. You don't use words like that.
Mhm.
And we also have a similarity where my grandmother, when she passed, would come to me, my brother in our room, and we would see her and like we would hear her. I'd go to bed saying, I don't want to see you. And still to this day, my clairvoyance is like not on fire because my whole childhood was like, I don't want to see you. I don't want to see you. Really shut that down. But like, what is that spirit communication like for you? Do they speak through your heart? Do they speak through your
Mm.
mind? Can you see them?
Yeah, at night I can see them really clearly. And it's interesting because it'll go through waves. Like over the last month, they have been so active. And it's a little I still get shaken. Like I still want to do this at night
Yeah.
because it's just a very different context, I guess, than my daytime connection. My daytime connection is like a see feel. So I have a vision it's like in my third eye, but it's also a really strong feeling and knowing. So it sort of moves together. I don't necessarily, clear audience isn't necessarily the strongest. I can hear, but it's more again a knowing. It's a strong like see, no, hear, no, really, really powerfully. But at nighttime, that's when when I have my eyes open and I actually see the figures come in. And I'm curious because sometimes I'm not sure of who they are. They're not necessarily ancestors now. They may be beings that are ready to move on. They may be people recently departed. I'm not quite sure. So, because nighttime has always been a little bit wild, I just dream constantly. I'm traveling constantly. I don't think I ever rest at nighttime. It's like
Yeah.
I kind of have to get it together now that I'm saying this out loud. My daytime, it just feels like, okay, I know how to do this. But nighttime feels a bit wild to me. And maybe that's the way it's supposed to be because different things are happening and moving through at nighttime. But yeah, daytime, that's how I do it. And people always ask me, well, how did you see that? Like I'll see people's loved ones, animal spirits, those types of things. When they were on my table and I would do healings, they would just come in so clearly. So yeah, I guess I am a medium in that way.
For
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. I mean, I've been listening to you for years. I'm like, this
Yeah.
girl's a medium. Like she is like, but again, we all, mediumship, traditional mediumship, I feel like it's a pathway to get to where we're going. That like, I
Yes.
think we're all in the helping profession. Like I see it with, osteopaths. I see it with, even massage therapists. I connect a lot with angel energy. They're the only
Mhm.
beings I can see with my naked eye, and they come through as light for me. And so I don't see shadowy figures unless it's my objective clairvoyance, like the world
Yeah.
behind my eyes, but subjectively, I can see angels clearly. And there's been pictures of people capturing their light kind of like coming through me, like at the retreat last week. And they don't frighten me at all because they come through with such an essence of love.
Mhm.
But yeah, it sounds like you're very clairsentient, very claircognizant, and they usually work
Mhm.
in good harmony with each other. And I
Mhm.
imagine too, because of the, trauma you've had with your body through the, autoimmune stuff that you've had
Mhm.
going on for your whole life almost, you would be more in tune with your body. So spirit would work to you through the emotional body, through the physical body. So it's fascinating for me as a mediumship teacher because I'm like, I love nuance and I love
Mhm.
asking people like with Sean, who's clairaudient with his names. I'm like, how do you get those names? And he would like, explain it to me as best as he could. But the language of spirit for us all is so intimate
It
and just
is.
so different. And that's like how I like asking people that really detailed question.
Mhm.
And then interesting enough, there is this philosophy around night workers, I guess, like people who are in the helping profession who also help spirits at night. And sometimes I wake up, I'm like, was I abducted by aliens last night? Like, how am I not rested? And like, I literally slept for like 10 hours.
I hear
So
that. I think that's totally true. And I feel that too. And I was thinking, I swear I dreamed like 12 dreams last night. How is that possible?
yeah.
That's wild. Yeah, I used to go, if I flew a lot. Like when I had my private practice, I would feel myself flying a lot. And that's where I would get people's remedies, or remedies would drop in. I was like, oh my gosh, that patient's coming tomorrow. That's exactly what they need. Like I would just see or feel it in that way. Or we'd visit, I always feel like it's a visit because it's like we're sitting having coffee, or we're sitting having a conversation, or we're going on a canoe ride, or we're doing something. It just feels like a beautiful visit. So I always
Mm.
know those dreams that are visiting dreams where I'm like, oh no, our spirits visited last night, right? As versus
Oh,
something else that's just playing out.
I love that because I don't dream very much at all. I do, or well, I'm sure I do. I have no
Yes.
recollection. Like I think maybe two dreams a year, and they're usually pretty disturbing. which is
Oh,
probably why I remember
wow.
them. I really have no recollection of dreams. So I don't know what happens in my dream state. But there's been two times with my students where I've had dreams about them and they also had dreams about me that night. So I was like, we totally met up in our dreams. One
Yeah.
was in my minivan. I was like, I had a dream about you last night. And she was like, were we in your minivan? I was like, we were in my minivan. And so I know that there's a lot that happens like in our dream state. And it is actually a lot of like in more indigenously connected people that do a lot of dream work. I think of one of my friends, Cindy Charlie Boy, who does a lot of like indigenous inspired like dream work and stuff like that. So I'm going to just put the intention out there to remember my dreams a little bit more.
Well, let's put an intention out that we visit each other. We
We
will
visit
do
each
that.
other. We go hang out. Canoe, I'd be down. Well, we'll go do something. But you know how sometimes when you talk about like when you leave a speaking engagement, like there's that kind of like rumination where like doubt might creep in or woulda, coulda, shoulda kind of creeps in, which is totally part of the human experience. For me, when I started to be a voice for spirit, that's where a lot of my doubts started coming in. I never realized like, oh, I have insecurities or I can't believe I don't trust myself to this level. Did you have anything that you had to work through to trust the wisdom that was coming through you through those extra senses? Or have you always just been someone who's like, I'm just trusting what's coming through me because they've like never led me wrong yet?
Yeah. That's a good question. I think I did trust, and I think because I felt like if I didn't trust, they would stop coming. I don't know why I felt that. I mean, and that probably wasn't true, but I just felt like it was an honoring or reverence to
Mm,
that. But you know what? And to be fair, the first messages that would come would be remedies. So it was kind of a clear, like, and then I got to test it out. So I got to give the remedy to the person, and then they got well. So then I could really have this sort of evidence that would come back to me and say, oh, that remedy really worked. So that was a really great way to practice that channel or that spirit message coming through. Or it would be like we do a journey and then an animal spirit would come and then they would say, right, I just saw a deer. And I'd be like, I saw your deer too. I saw your moose too. So
mm,
I think that helped me build up that confidence. I probably was at the beginning, though, a little bit doubtful. I was more doubtful of sharing it with people, like just thought, why is this happening and what is going on? And am I meant to share this? It was
mm.
more boundary. Like I was like, am I meant to share this? Is it fair for me to share this? Is this something that these people want? I was always very like highly acutely aware of that.
Yeah, good ethics, right? Which
Yeah.
I think in all these non-regulated industries, there needs to be a deeper conversation as well, right? Is like around the ethics of all of this because people will just, for whatever reason, whether it's to be seen or heard, just like, really do drive by
Yes.
healings and readings. I know I've received a couple myself and it's
Oh,
been a bit
yes.
jarring.
Oh, it's so jarring. I think that's why I'm so careful is because I've been on the receiving end of people saying like, I have a spirit message for you. And then they just tell me, and I don't even have a chance to say I want it or not. So now I'm very careful. Even if I dream about somebody, I had a dream about you. May I share it? You came
Yes.
to me, you
Oh,
dream
no,
last night.
sorry. I
May I
thought you were
share?
asking me.
No, I didn't know about you.
Look how natural this is flowing. I'm like, yes, Asha. No.
But yeah, see, it's just like I think I just am so careful with that because it feels very disruptive and very it shakes to me to the core when somebody just jumps into my energy without my permission. It really like, and I know that we do that naturally a little bit just as open people. Like right now we're in communication. If we're in conversation, I'm okay with that because I've said yes to this conversation and our hearts are open to one another. But it was
Yeah.
just like a random hit. I'm like, no, I didn't even know you were coming into my field, right? So yeah, those things they are such good conversations. When I do my mentorship classes, that is something that is like at the forefront of our teachings.
Yeah, it's something I try to bring up too. It's just, in mediumship in particular, it's very sensationalized to like
I know.
go to a bakery and like, is your mom dead kind of thing, right? And it's just like, and I get that, I filmed a pilot last year too, and I was just like, I'm not comfortable with like we just don't know where people are in their healing journey, and we can't assume that everyone wants to be that vulnerable as well, right? Like vulnerability for people is for me, it's a superpower. Like I see nothing but superpower when it comes to vulnerability. But
Me
for
too.
when you look at like even like the tarot system, like vulnerability is actually a
Yes.
negative connotation. And I think more collectively, vulnerability is seen as like a weakness when it
Yeah.
is a superpower. And not
Yes.
everyone is ready or safe to meet you in that vulnerability, right? So there has to be like certain level of consent around it.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate that we do share that as far as like the ethics go around it. And I'll just share a funny story because I do leave it to spirit. I've always had a really clear channel between me and my guides. Not in the past year. They've kind of effed off as life got a little bit hard, but
Oh,
that's okay. They'll come back. They'll come back.
yeah.
I have to walk through some things, I think,
Yeah.
right? So I remember getting a hit from somebody and I was getting my tires changed. And I was like, I'm not doing that, spirit. I am not approaching this person. But I just kept feeling it. And I was like, okay, if you want me to say something to them, you have them talk to me. And no sooner than I said me, this person turns to me and just like starts talking to me. And I was like, no, I'm still not doing it. Like, because I was very new to my development at that time too, and I was not in my full confidence. And again, that part about just sharing the information was trickier than receiving it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's something that comes up a lot for my students. So I'm glad that we're bringing it up and we're talking about
Yeah.
it. Um, yeah, anything else like when it comes to something, I feel like I just want to open this up. Like, is there something else along that vein of like ethics and integrity with this type of work that you love to focus on in your mentorship classes?
Hmm. That's a really great question. I think that it's interesting because homeopathy became regulated halfway through my career. So it was an unregulated profession and then it became regulated. So I really had to think in my own self, like, okay, what does this mean about how I practice? Because I did practice very much more energetically. So I think in my mentorship classes now, and I'm going to do another one in the fall, I think that even having like an ethics practice and having sort of these are guidelines. It's something that I think is really important that I learned through being a regulated profession. And I think that a lot of these spiritual practices and new age ways of being there so amazing. But yeah, everybody, we can just kind of do all these things. So I talk about a lot about hands-on healing and things like that. And I think just asking for permission is just so important in anything that we do. So that's probably the number one thing that I think that just having that consent for anything is really, really important. It's something we forget
Yeah.
in all of these practices.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I don't do gifted readings and I haven't for years because
Mm,
that doesn't give me the depth of consent
right.
really required to
Right.
get into people's energy in very intimate ways. I'm a Scorpio rising, so I
Uh,
bring through pretty deep stuff. Like it's not light. My students have a joke, like keeping it light over here. You know what I mean? So
oh my
there has to
gosh.
be a real deep level of consent, and that is through the whole booking process, right? It's like you
That's so
read the
true.
terms, you did the exchange, and like there's a deep level of consent there, which is how come I stopped doing my gifted readings a couple years ago because it just you could
Oh.
feel there's only so much.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I was thinking as you were saying that, what I was thinking about is when I first started practicing art, I had my business. I would do a lot of exchanges. Like that would just be the biggest thing, the way we'd go to networking. There was no social media when I first started my business. So it would be a lot of like exchanges, which, in an economy, a true exchange economy is a beautiful way of doing things. And at that time, it really wasn't working because it would be something that I didn't want, that somebody would want to do an exchange for. And then it wasn't that reciprocity energy that was coming back and forth. So that's something I talk a lot about in my mentorship classes and having like a clear exchange, whether that is monetary or a gift or something, but something that feels like a true exchange, I think is
Yeah.
really important. And because what I started to notice is that resentment would come and build up, or there'd be a bitterness. And I never wanted that to be in my work,
Yeah.
ever, ever, ever. So I'm very clear now, even about scholarships and gifting and all of those things, and how that feels, because I think that even then, spirit comes through a little bit differently, just depending on the reciprocity.
Yeah. Well, and I'm glad that you bring this up. I have a whole podcast episode on reciprocity, and it's the number
Oh,
one value of my community.
I love that.
Because I too, like even in some collaborations, like it's hard to find that exact balance of reciprocity, right? And that's something that has taxed me energetically over the years is kind of like the extracting energy when it doesn't come back in any kind of yeah, reciprocity. So I feel you on that. And I had a bit of collab burnout and fatigue with that
Mm.
as well because of something similar. But yeah, I agree. I will always do a trade for a photo shoot. Okay.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
I just laughed because I had a photographer come to my retreat last year who wanted to take my program in exchange for a photo shoot. I was like, hey, can you come do like 30 of us?
Of
Anyways, I
course.
paid her extra on top, but to make sure it was reciprocal, I said, this
Yeah.
is the dollar value exchange. To have you fly in, to have you come scope it out, to stay for a couple extra hours, what would that be? And it's like it's just generous upon generous upon generous, abundance upon abundance upon abundance. Like reciprocity, I think, is just a core value in civilization that could be so healing on so many levels if people just embrace it.
Yes, I love that. And I'm not saying I would never do
I
exchanges, but
know.
I just was thinking about the way that I think a lot of people, and the people I mentor mostly are like Reiki practitioners or they're oracle readers. And I think from giving heart place, we just want to like, we think, oh, we just want to like heal the world, you know? So there's just, I think there's a lot of things we need to think about in that way where we don't burn out, because otherwise we'll burn out, we'll get better. And then
Yeah.
our medicine doesn't come through so clearly.
I love that. Thank you for bringing that up. Okay, so the last area I want to focus on, and this is a huge, I'm so interested in this with you. And I think that we also have a lot of similarities here about stepping into motherhood. Like,
Mhm.
I know that it sounds like we both probably had difficult first pregnancies and birthing experiences, which were initiations in themselves. I came into my mediumship development literally 2 months after my daughter was born. In Canada, we're blessed to get a year maternity leave. I worked for government essentially, so I was very taken care of for this whole year. Got to explore my mediumship faculties, and it was beautiful for me. And so you also have always had a calling to be a mother. And I know that the stacked odds were against you with lupus, but you just held on to that vision. So what was the journey like for you and your partner? I know you guys have been together a long time as well, to bringing that creation into the world. And what has that meant for you?
Oh, it's meant so much. I did. I remember when I was really small, maybe 5 or 6, and I was just like, I cannot wait to be a mother one day. And I had these little cousins that I would just practice with. It was so joyful to me to be around children. I loved it so much. And my husband and I, we waited quite a long time, primarily because we were both self-employed, and we just had like a longer stretch of like kind of having to wait. And also the doctor said, I would just like red light on this. Like your antibodies are too high. You can't try. You're going to have miscarriage after miscarriage. And there was something really strong in me that did not believe him. I just didn't believe him. I thought, no, no, I see myself with children. This is going to happen. And I say that very sensitively because I know so many people go through that journey and that's not the result for them. So I just have so much compassion for those stories. I was so blessed to get pregnant, and I loved being pregnant. I felt like that spirit of creation that we speak about, that spirit of creation alive in my waters, there was nothing like that. There's nothing like that since, I don't think. It was so magical. I loved my big belly. I loved all of it. I felt so alive. And I even felt better in my physical body, I think, because hormonally something shifted during that time for the lupus. So it was amazing. And as you shared, I had a really horrible first birth. I split my pelvis open and I couldn't walk, and I didn't have maternity leave. So I had to go back to work really fast. And so there's been like a lot of just teachings around that and our journey together as souls. And then some regret even about looking back and not having that time that I wished I'd had. I wish I had a year or more to be with that baby and all those things. So motherhood's so interesting that way because it pushes you into your stuff really fast. I
Yeah.
think that you also are at lower capacity at times, so you don't even have the energy to even compensate for those things, right? So it's been a beautiful journey, and I see my children as they are so proud of being Indigenous. Like their pride is so strong and they really don't carry any shame. They don't carry the things I carried as a child when I would hide my beaded earrings or pretend that I wasn't Indigenous or they don't have any of that. They want to speak on Truth and Reconciliation Day. They're like, well, we're Indigenous. I love it. They sing these songs. They're so proud. And that makes me so happy that somehow I've done something to transmute that pain. So they carry other pain, I'm sure, but that's not one of them they're carrying forward. So that
Yeah,
vision has worked.
that it has. And that's a beautiful story. And how old are your boys?
7 and 12.
Yeah, mine are 7 and 11. So very, very, very close. And yeah, that's a beautiful story. And when you talk about capacity, we have a lot of the same language. And that's what I love about like getting to know you and like getting familiar with your work. I was like, I talk about capacity a lot as well, as a mom, as a business owner, because I'm full-time entrepreneur now for the past 5 years. And it's definitely a different world. So you being in it like before even the internet, like hail to you because that's a totally different world to live in. But one thing that comes up a lot, because a lot of moms listen to me, is that they really do struggle with the responsibilities. Because think about, we're in helping professions, and then we also bring these lives into the world that we are in complete service to and for. And so I can find that sometimes moms maybe have a little bit of extra compassion fatigue, that potentially it's harder sometimes to fit spiritual practices or the way things like were into the new life. Did you have any of that? Like, how did your personal practices and your personal rituals shift and change through motherhood and the capacity being completely shifted?
Oh my goodness. I feel like everything changes, right? I think I probably took a break from doing some of those things because I just didn't have any space to do them. Um, I was in survival mode probably during those months. I think that that's normal. You're in survival mode for quite a while. And even like, it sounds so simple, but reading a book, like I used to read all the time. And I remember thinking, I really miss reading a book, which seems like that's a spiritual practice for me, is just sitting down and reading. Simple things like that. I think it's okay if it takes a while to get back to it. So it might just be that you're lighting a candle that day, or you're putting a little bit of tobacco down that day. And then once your children are old enough, you can do that together. So I'd say as soon as my children were old enough, then it felt like it was coming back where we could do things together. But up until that point, anything that I'd really had dedicated to was really hard to still do, I think, in those ways. And I
Yeah.
think that's normal. I hope that's normal.
It is. And this is one of the main reasons why I wanted to come on the podcast, is because when people look at me, my career, and how much I've done just in the past 4 years, how do you do this as a mom? I'm like, I'm burned out. And, we're learning as we go, and we're just following every inspiration, but it's not easy. It's not easy. And there's always sacrifices. And so I think that that's a beautiful answer. And I think that's going to be hugely permission giving to a lot of the moms that listen, who feel that they need to be very active in their spiritual practices to be spiritual.
No, yeah.
Um,
I
yeah.
mean, think about it. If you're like a dreamer like me, I'm like, I'm doing my spiritual practice all night. I feel like sometimes that we have a very like rigid way of looking at what practice is, perhaps, or how it's supposed to look, even, and how Instagram makes it look. And
Yeah.
that's not necessarily accessible to everybody either. So I think about that. And with like that guilt, like trying to balance, it's something I say a lot now with, and you can understand this in this phase right now. We're in it. We're in it with the ages that they're in. We're trying to run these businesses. We're trying to like share our best medicine in the world. We're doing all the things at full capacity, right? And it's really hard. So I've been traveling a lot over the last 2 years, and it's really hard to leave my boys. It's been like it's heart-wrenching. I love my work. I love speaking. I love meeting people. I love going to different places, and my heart's at home too. So I don't know how you make that work. I don't know. I still come home and I think, oh my goodness, I've missed out on these 4 days. I feel guilt. I have to breathe with it and be with it, but I sit with those things all the time. So I think we need to normalize that.
Oh, this is so energizing for me. And I know people are going to be writing and saying thank you, because this is something they've asked me to talk about for a long time, but it's easier to have a conversation around it. And, I'm curious about like your two boys, like what are their favorite rituals to do? What are the ones that they're most drawn to that, you've walked through with them?
Oh my goodness. They love to smudge. They love to sing songs. Like we learn songs together because I'm learning songs, new songs, sometimes. We love to learn words together.
Mm.
Love to put tobacco down together. And you know what I love? That this is something that I haven't taught them or asked them for, but if I'm not feeling well, they'll just take their beautiful healer hands and they'll just like place it on my head, or they'll place it on my feet. And like it is the gentlest, it makes me emotional, the gentlest, most kindest, loving touch. Um, that I think, where did they get that from? I didn't teach them. I didn't say, oh, this is how we do Reiki or this is how we do energy healing. They just have this knowing to do that. And that is the most precious thing, I think.
I love that so much. My little guy's a little Libra dude, and he's 7.
Mm.
He's so gentle, and he's just like so filled with love. And I was going through a bit of a hard time a couple of weeks ago, and my brain, he could just tell I wasn't there. I wasn't present. We were laying down to bed, and he was like, "Mom, do you need help clearing your mind?" And I was
Oh.
like, sure. And he guided me through breath work. Like he was
Oh,
like, okay, breathe in, follow me. And he was like counting on his fingers.
oh
And it's
God.
because one of my students, Sonia, recorded this. I'm going to send it to you after because for you and your boys, but it's called Meet Your Dragon Meditation. And it's just so beautiful. And she does like this breath work to like relax and clear. So they listen, they pay attention. They're really embodying the things that click with them as like little practices. And that's not something I taught him. It's something Sonia taught him. And he uses it for me last night before bed. He was doing it too. He's like, do you need help clearing your mind again, Mom? And
Oh,
I was telling my husband this morning, I'm like, when you lay with Nicholas in bed tonight, ask him to help you clear his mind. Cause it's just so innocent. It's so sweet. It's so pure.
wow.
And it's just medicine for the heart. It's just medicine for the heart.
Oh, I love that. Well, it takes a village. I think that phrase really, really is true. It rings true to me.
Yeah. So what do you hope for your boys and the future generations in your line? Where are we going?
Oh my goodness. I I can kind of see, one of them is named Prairie Man. So I think he has this visionary aspect and element. He's very sensitive. So I think that there is like a visionary aspect to change or breaking down systems or creating a new way, dreaming a new way. And the other one is Chief of the Good Road. And he is a very strong personality. So I'm wondering how they're going to advocate for their lives and their people and all of the things and the generations to come. I see them using their voices and their hearts. And I see this generation as they are the ones, right? Like they're the ones to kind of clean up the mess that we've made of this earth. And I think that they carry some sort of different vibration. They've come in. So I have hope. I know some people don't feel that we have hope, but I have hope that they're going to be the ones to come in and do some of that alchemy work
Yeah.
and do some of that dismantling work. I think that some of that unweaving is happening now, and they're going to be the ones to bring in the fresh energy of like, this is, and they're not going to say no. Like they're very strong.
They
They're not going to
are.
say no. They're just like, this is what I'm determined to do this. But I don't know. I see both of my boys having very healing hearts. So I'm hoping that they'll share that. My eldest, this is really beautiful. We just lost my father-in-law a couple months ago, and he wanted to speak at the funeral. He wanted to do the eulogy, and I was in shock watching him get up there and speak in front of all these people. He wasn't nervous. So I thought, wow, that's just one of those examples of what they watch. And if I never had taken those steps to speak and got that shy girl inside, brave and courageous, he wouldn't be doing that right now. And it just reminds me of that. It gives me chills. So I think
Mm.
that's just an impetus to keep going for all of us, right? It's like our children are watching us, they're seeing us, we're modeling this for them, and this is who they become.
Yes. Powerful, Asha, powerful. And I think that that's a very wise place to leave this. And I really, really appreciate that wisdom coming in. I know there's going to be a lot of parents listening. And, whenever I get approached by people who have sensitive children, I'm like, develop yourself, right? Get to know your energy, the world of energy, and be their best resource
Yeah.
possible. Right. And so I love that. And I know that we have like complicated histories being the second generation out of schools, and we're kind of like in that in between generation of what was and what will come. And, I share that hope for the future generations, even being on social media with watching Gen Z. I'm like, they're not going to put up with shit.
Right.
I'm like, the 5-day work week is going to be gone by the time like they're older. Like it's going to be shifted and changed, and they seem to be a lot more mobilized than we were even. And so,
Yeah.
I hold that prayer, I hold that vision for our culture, for our civilization, for our countries, for Turtle Island and beyond. So, in closing, Asha, is there anything that you would love to share with the audience, like any final words? And, how can people go deeper into your work? How can people find you, work with you, all that fun stuff?
Oh, I love that. Oh, this has been such a great conversation. I think I just love to invite people back to the spirit of their medicine, like connecting, even taking a moment and a breath and finding that spark, maybe that creation story that was dreamed for you here. And as you said, our ancestors dreamed us here for generations, and we are the ones that are living out what they could not. So I love to remember that. That always pushes me forward. And speaking of the ancestors, I have that new deck coming out in December. It's called, it's kind of written with the ancestors and the grandmothers. Is the Animal Elder Oracle. So the animals hold the eldership in this deck because, again, of those accessibility things that, we haven't always been having access to our elders. So how can we call on the animals to be those elders and to give us the information that we need or the wisdom? So I'm so excited for this deck because it's like, oh my goodness, the artist is amazing. It's from like my home territory, so we're really in alignment. And I'd love folks to pre-order that if they have the capacity to do that. And then you can find me on Instagram mostly. It's asha.frost.
Perfect. And I will have links. I pre-ordered it. I think it comes out in December. I think that's when it comes out, but I pre-ordered it, and I will have links to all of this in the show notes below. So thank you, Asha, for gracing us with your wisdom and your presence. And I wish nothing but the most expansive light to follow you from here on out in your career. So thank you so much for coming to Spirit School.
Thank you for having me.
Who holds space for you? I see you out there. I see you delving into your intuitive abilities, holding space for your families, keeping it all together in life that is moving so fast with so many responsibilities. You are a space holder, and you need a place to land. The Spirit School Collective is a space where I hold space for the space holders of the world. This is a place to get in tune at a deeper level with your intuitive and mediumship abilities, but also a space to integrate and to be in community with people who understand what it's like to wear many hats in this human experience. Come try it for a month, come stay for a year. You get to choose your adventure and your journey, but the Spirit School Collective is where I am officially holding space for the space holders of the world. I hope to see you there.